Hello, my name is Nicole Harmon. I'm the director of Humane Indiana Wildlife. We are a wildlife rehabilitation center located in Northwest Indiana. And what we do is we cover 26 counties and provide wildlife rehabilitation services, which means we care for injured and orphaned native wildlife. They have to be an animal that is found in Indiana, and there has to be something wrong. So we see animals that come into the rehab center for all different reasons, whether it is an animal who's been hit by a car, maybe has fishing line entangled around a part of their body, maybe they got into a fight with another animal, whether it's domestic or a wild animal itself. Really, there's any number of reasons that animals can come into our care. Our job is to provide them treatment, raise them if they come in as orphans, and get them back out into the wild if we possibly can. So far, like I said, we've taken in animals from 26 counties, but that doesn't mean they couldn't come from further away. So far this year, we've taken in just over 300 animals, and we were asked if we could provide you with a video in lieu of coming to the symposium that was held by by Dunes Learning Center to be able to give you a sneak peek of what we do inside our facility. So we're going to take you on inside and you guys can see what we do here. So right now, because of the pandemic, really we have a table that's set up outside that's an exam table, instructing people to put the animal onto the exam table and return back to their cars. This is an effort to keep everybody safe, whether it is ourselves or members of the community who come in as rescuers. But usually we're able to have people come into our facility, and when they do, the lobby is the only place that we are legally allowed to have people come into. We follow laws that are provided to us by U.S. Fish and Wildlife and DNR, and one of those laws states that we cannot allow people to come and visit the native wildlife in our care. So really this door is as far as people can come. When they come into the rehab center, we do ask them to fill out this form. And on there, it's listed where the rescuer lives, their name and phone number, where the animal was actually rescued from, and the reasons for rescue. Did maybe that person find them in the middle of the road? Did they take that animal from their cat? We need to know all of these things before we can provide that animal with treatment. So the lower part of the exam form is also something that the staff implements. We use this when we're providing those animals with exams to be able to take notes on, so that later on we can go back there and really see whether or not there's been improvement in that animal, or, access those documents maybe months down the road if people call and want to know what had happened to the animal that they brought in. So once we get past this door, this is where we end up keeping a lot of the animals that come into our care, especially the ones who have some of the more serious injuries. By far, out of all the buildings, or out of all the rooms within this building, our nursery is the busiest one. Inside this room, we actually keep all of our native mammals, all of our mammals who are on formula and less than 8 weeks of age. So we implement incubators, we implement heating pads, and these smaller bird cages and plastic totes to be able to keep everybody nice and warm. So we'll go ahead and peek inside some of these incubators right now and show you some of the animals that we have in care. So in this incubator, we actually have a nest of baby bunnies, as well as some baby chipmunks that had come in just yesterday. These animals had actually come to us, some of them being cat caught, some of them having been found by domestic dogs, some of them being found by people who are just doing lawn work. This other group in here is a nest of baby possums, and these possums actually came to us after their mother was found in somebody's backyard, and she was already deceased. And so somebody rescued all the babies and brought them into our care for us to take care of them here. Out of all the animals in these incubators, both sets, or all 3 sets of animals, will be with us for at least the next 8 weeks, staying in our care, being provided food, being taught how to be wild animals, being taught how to forage and how to climb, which isn't something that always comes naturally. These larger cages that are up here house different species of squirrels. So in this enclosure, we actually have some fox squirrels. This one's about 5 weeks of age at this point. And then we have some gray squirrels in some of these other enclosures. Everybody's all kind of tucked up after their afternoon feedings. Our babies get fed here at the rehab center dependent on their age. And some of our youngest babies will actually get fed up to 6 times a day. with the older babies getting fed formula, that is, maybe only 1 or 2 times a day. These babies at this point are 6 weeks old and only being fed 3 times a day for formula, and they have been started on a solid diet. So a lot of work and a lot of consideration goes into the care of these animals to determine what really is best for them. Some of these older squirrels now aren't quite needing formula as often, and they are kept at just 2 days a week for formula. As you can see, all of the animals inside these enclosures have numbers that they're associated with. That is actually put on that intake form that I was talking about a little bit ago, and we keep a documentation that follows that animal through their entire stay here at the rehab center to let us know exactly what ends up happening to them. Did they maybe die in care if something happened? Did they get released? What was their final outcome while they were here? We also list on there for anybody who is helping to take care of those animals. We list on there what they're being fed and maybe any medication that they might be on so that people know who might not be there every day. Inside of our Ward 2, we actually keep our birds of prey. So these are some larger enclosures here. They're big enough for some large hawks and owls to be able to stand, be able to turn around. We want to make sure that everybody has ample space so they're comfortable, but at the same time, not exercising as often because we want to make sure everybody stays nice and relaxed. Right now, we don't have any adult birds of prey in care that are patients. However, this is nesting season for our species of owls and hawks. And so we do have one great horned owl chick who had fallen out of a nest and actually sustained some eye injuries after that fall. So he's having some vision issues in the back of his right eye. Basically, there's a big bruise there that is preventing him from having clear vision. So we're treating him with some anti-inflammatory medication and some pain medication as well, with the hopes that that bruise begins to reabsorb and his vision can clear up. Within the next couple of weeks, he'll actually be placed with one of our education ambassador great horned owls, and she will act as his surrogate mom, and he can stay with her for the number of weeks before he'll be released late summer. That is, his release is pending upon how his vision is. If he ends up having poor vision and it's not something that can be repaired, he's not going to be able to be released back to the wild. And at that point, he would become an education ambassador for another facility. So he's just one example of different birds of prey we can get in. We see all kinds of hawks and owls, falcon species here, and of course eagles. We've gotten 6 eagles into our care in the past 5 years. And it's something that we have to be prepared for at any point in time. Our Ward 2 is for our songbirds. I had mentioned I had called the first ward we were in Ward 2, but that was actually Ward 1 that houses the birds of prey. Ward 2 houses our songbirds. And inside here, these enclosures are basically just mesh-sided areas that are soft on feathers for birds to be able to kind of move around safely without feathers being damaged. The incubators in this room are kept for younger birds or maybe eggs that are in the process of hatching. I do believe we have some baby songbirds in care at the moment. Yep, we do. These are some house finches that had come into care. They actually were found inside of a potted plant at a home improvement store, and employees found them, knew they didn't belong there, knew mom wasn't anywhere around because they had just got the shipment in and actually brought it to our rehab center. So right now the majority of these enclosures are actually empty, but that's because we are just at the very beginnings of baby season, and they will very quickly fill up as time goes on. As we move through the rehab center and we enter our hallway, this area is actually meant for larger animals. So geese are in this area, adult ducks, adult possums. We're not going to show you inside any of these enclosures simply because these are animals who are all within treatment, who are wild animals. With that being said, though, we do have one of our own inside this enclosure. Tuna is one of our ambassador possums, and she had actually she went through surgery after having a fatty tumor removed by Dr. McAfee's clinic. So Tuna's in here as well, only for the time being while her wound heals, and then she'll be able to go back out into her permanent enclosure while she is kind of in limbo in between doing education programs. At the very center of our building is our kitchen area. This is another really busy area within our building because all of the animals within our care are on special diets, and they all have unique foods that are specific for their species. So different grains that are for the ducks, insectivores. We have specific food for omnivores. Our rodents all get rodent block. So all these different foods, we can't just throw food to anybody. We have to make sure that the diets are appropriate for their species. We also maintain different formulas for the different species that we have as well. So if you're a squirrel, you get one type of formula. If you are a possum, you get a different type. If you're a bird, you get a different type of formula. And because we have so many animals that come into care, we have to make sure that we chart everything. So these charts that are up on the wall here will help us to make sure that we know who's been cared for during the day. During the summer months, we get pretty busy with interns that are in. So we want to make sure that nobody gets overlooked, and we want to make sure that nobody accidentally gets fed twice when they should only be getting fed once. So as we move back out into the hallway and come to the end, there we have another enclosure here. This would be Ward 3. And this is actually our indoor housing for our snowy owl. And our snowy owl is a permanent resident. This is Alfred. Alfred has actually been in our care since December of 2018 after he was hit by a car in Whiting. And when he was hit by a car, he actually sustained a wing break to his left wing, which resulted in him not being able to fly. So he is going to stay with us in our care for the rest of his life. And he's actually an education ambassador. He comes out with us on programs to the community during those colder months, and we're able to share our mission, and we're able to share his story while we're out within the public. But again, because he's an Arctic animal, he only comes out with us from the months of October to May. Once it starts to get too hot outside, he's not able to come out with us anymore. He also is kept inside because he is an Arctic animal, and we have to make sure that he maintains a nice cold temperature and doesn't overheat, which is very easy for him to do. Our back hallway maintains smaller enclosures that are meant for those mammals that kind of graduate off of formula and are now on solid foods, but maybe not quite ready to be outside. They would still be in the nest with mom and just learning how to forage on their own. So here we have a group of larger baby possums who, again, they came in as orphans. They would definitely still be hanging out with mom for the next couple of weeks, but not necessarily nursing off of her anymore. So they're able to come here. They will be with us for at least another month as they continue to grow. We release them when they're about 10 inches long, 10 or 12 inches. Generally, that's the size where they're ready to go and they're able to forage on their own and really fend for themselves. They're good at climbing and they're efficient in being able to scavenge. So over here we also have some adult, or some, I would guess to say, some subadult squirrels. These guys we are completely hands-off with now. People often ask us, well, once you're feeding the babies, don't they get used to being held in your hands? Well, once they reach a certain age, they don't want anything to do with us anymore. And that's what we see with these squirrels here. They're only interested in eating and kind of hanging out with themselves. They're not coming up to us anymore, and that's exactly what we're looking for. We don't want them spending time with people. We want them to be released and be able to go about their lives as wild animals. And our final ward within our building is Ward 4. And during the summer months, this is designated for our ducks. So right now we have 8 ducklings in care. They are mallards, and then we have 1 gosling who came in yesterday. As a rule of thumb in wildlife rehab, you never raise any babies by themselves. So for now, that gosling will hang out with the mallards. Once he gets a little bit older and we have some more goslings come into care, which will certainly happen, he'll be able to go in with them. But for now, he has the company of those mallards so that he's not by himself. Our exam room is generally the first place that animals come into when they come to the rehab center. This area is where staff is able to give everybody a physical to tell exactly what's going on with them. We're able to work across from one another with that exam table and be able to properly restrain and safely restrain the animals. We're able to kind of use this as a one-stop shop for providing medication and any sort of treatment that they would need while they're here at the rehab center. So there's quite a lot that goes on the inside of this building, but the enclosures on the outside of the building are just just as important. So we'll take you back through the hallway here, back to the front of our building, and show you the outside enclosures that would be considered our pre-release enclosures. So to kind of give you an idea, the building is shaped like a big square with the kitchen being in the center. And so that kind of helps you to orient how everything is set up. So when you walk back out of the building and you come a little bit north on the property, this is where we have some of our enclosures. Our 2 enclosures up front, the ones that can be viewed by the general public, house 2 education ambassadors. This is Phoenix. She is a red-tailed hawk, and Phoenix has actually been in our care for about the last 5 years. She suffered from West Nile and was brought to us from South Bend, Indiana, where she was found on the side of the road as a very young chick. It's believed that when she had first come out of her nest and was learning how to fly, she didn't do so well for obvious reasons. Her feathers are a little bit damaged on one side. Came into the rehab center under a different rehabilitator at the time, and it was determined that she had suffered from West Nile. And what we see in West Nile is birds who have feather damage. So it worked out perfectly well for us to be able to see exactly what was going on with her. Inside this enclosure, I'm not sure that you'll be able to see him, is actually our great horned owl. He spends his day roosting at the very top and kind of resting on and off. He came into our rehab center as a 2-week-old chick after having fallen from his tree. Great horned owls will steal nests from other birds as opposed to building a nest themselves. And his mother actually took a nest from a red-shouldered hawk, which is considerably smaller than what his mother would have been. And so that nest was far too small for him and his mother and his 2 other siblings. So once he got to be about 2 weeks of age and those babies were starting to move around a little bit more, he ended up falling out and sustaining a wing break that left him unable to get back up and unable to eventually be released back into the wild. So towards the back of our property here, we have more pre-release enclosures and housing for some of our other ambassadors. So if you've ever joined us for education programs, you've met our striped skunk Oreo, our red fox bandicoot, our bandicoot's actually sitting out right now in the sun enjoying the weather. And then Tuna, who, like I had mentioned before, is actually inside. She is usually out back as well, where she can be outside permanently. But because, like I said, because of her recent surgery, she's inside healing.